Awesome. So thanks a lot for being here today. Thanks a lot for hosting InnoQ, Fiberplane, and the DevOps meetup. I'm very happy and glad to be here. And today we're going to talk about a DevOps story, at least one of ours, and we're going to talk about partition tables. And at the end, hopefully, you will know what's the common thing of a person starting to smoke again. Uh, although that's bad for your health, please avoid this. Do not take it as advice. Partition tables and broken backups and a lot more other fun stuff. So I'm Adonis or Antonis, if you want to pronounce it in a more easy way. Thanks a lot for pronouncing it correctly. And with Paris, we have a company called Logic, but today we're going to talk about a previous company we had and how we fucked up. I heard this before, so I think that this is allowed to say. Does this work? Of course, no. Okay, I will use this. So I will ask a very crazy question. Has anybody here heard of a company called Sourceler? One. Oh, okay. We have to talk afterwards because I need to know how did you learn about us. So in a previous live, we had a company called Sourceler. We were doing developer tools and specifically an online IDE. So for this IDE, it's still available if you want to check it out. Not very well maintained, so please take it with a grain of salt. And we had a few problems. So we had collocate users. So users came into this environment in order to code. We need to be able to create developer environments really, really fast. So as soon as you logged into the service, you had to get something up and running. And then users would be able to do code editing, Git operations, other fun stuff, and of course have a web server running and terminals. So everything needed to run in a specific server and be able to be fast and available. So this created a big need for us. So the architecture that we needed to choose was not an easy one. So this meant that we need to have a file system. So that was POSIX compatible. So you cannot have, like a simple one. It needs to be POSIX compatible because the user is actually doing Git operations and other fun stuff in the file system. It needs to be available quickly in the node that you ended up running. So it's not like, oh, hello, you want to start your day, come back in 10 minutes. That was not acceptable. So we needed to be able to boot it fast. And all user scenarios like Git operations, running a web server, automatically reloading your applications, all that fun stuff should work out of the box. So that was very, very important. So after doing that, we needed a file system. So we said, okay, let's start looking for different options. The first option that we took was S3FS. You might have heard of it. So you have your files in a storage, something like S3, and then you mount this to your local node. Perfect. It's infinitely scalable. It's very cheap if you talk about storage. And of course, it can be available to multiple nodes. So let's say that you have 5 or 6 servers running for your users. You can have the file system available to the node, but it's actually not that fast. Okay, it might be fast enough to serve like an image or something, but if you want to do a list of your files or all these operations that you do in your normal day-to-day life as a developer, that's not very fast. And also it's not POSIX compliant. So okay, it might work for most of the cases, but not all of them. So okay, let's go to another solution. The next one was NFS. Nice. Okay, so we have like a network file system that's available. You have like your storage servers that make the file system available to other nodes. Perfect. It's a lot faster than S3FS if you make it, very close with a very fast network. But it's not very easy to scale, but you can manage it if you're good enough. We're not good enough, but other people could make it work for us. And it's almost POSIX compliant. So most of the things work, not all of them, as we found out later on. For example, it does not support file system events. So let's say that you have a web server, you change the file, this creates a file system event that goes to your application and automatically reloads. Most of your developer servers do that. NFS does not work with that. So if you want to try it out, don't. We tried, we failed, so don't do it. Especially if you need volumes. So let's say that you want to say that each user gets 1 GB of data, then things get more complicated very fast. So NFS was out of the question. So we ended up with the plain old simple solution. We would get local disks to the VMs of the users running. which is blazing fast. You have, a very fast block storage. It might be backed by an SSD or whatever, so it's really fast. It's fully POSIX compatible. It's the closest thing that you can have to file system. And of course, you can support more interesting file systems, as we later on figured out, like BTRFS, or you can have volumes or other fun stuff. So this means that, okay, we have a potential solution. Now we need to make it work. So first of all, this needs user sharding. So if you grow, we didn't grow as much, so we didn't need it eventually. But if you need to grow a lot, you need to start sharding your users. So let's say that Paris comes, then he goes to server A. If Nele comes, goes to server B, and then we should make sure that each user gets routed to the correct server each time. Another problem for another time that did not need to happen because we do not have that huge scale. Second issue is that you need a new backup strategy. So in S3FS or other file systems that we talked about before, the backup strategy is being handled by a third party. So Amazon or your object storage provider is doing their backups. Perfect. In NFS, then there are many solutions that work very nicely with NFS, with snapshots or other solutions. Great. But with our own solution, we needed to find a backup solution for us. And this was the start of our problems. So let's see what happened here. So we said, okay, we will start with daily or hourly block level backups. So we back up on the disk level, so not the file system, but the disk itself. Great. Then we need to add disk capacity notifications. So let's say that the disk storage starts growing and it starts going through the limit. We need to make sure we get notified and we do not end up with a full disk or corrupted file systems and those silly things. And of course, if backups fail, we need to know about it. So we said, okay, we need to set up email notifications. So when shit hits the fan, initially the presentation had a few stars, but after an Uber ride we had with Paris, going from the airport to the hotel, and there was a block in the road, so the driver started saying "Sise," or "Sise." Sorry, I don't have the very good pronunciation, so Paris told me that this means shit, so that was a nice addition to the presentation. So the first problem is that developers like JavaScript. I mean, everybody does. We want to have like 1,000 files to create one bundle afterwards. JavaScript needs node modules, and node modules use a lot of files in your file system. So even though those files are very small, you end up with issues with your inodes. Okay, that was a very nice, interesting thing we learned about, that you can have a disk that has capacity, but maybe your file system is out of inodes. So inodes are, those things in your file system that say, oh, there is a file called my.js, and this file is located in this path and has, these contents in the disk in this, location. So those inodes might be, you might be out of inodes before you get out of storage space. Maybe you know that, maybe you don't. We definitely did not know that initially. So that was the first problem that we faced. Then you might say, okay, my disk is misbehaving or something is wrong, so let's try to reboot the machine. But if you reboot the machine while the disk is in its limits, you might end up with disks in a bad state. So that was the second issue that we had. Okay, we said, something is not right, we don't know exactly what, let's reboot the system, we're engineers, we know, turn it off, turn it back on, maybe it works next time. Turns out it didn't. And the problem was that after we booted, we were in a bad state in the disk. The disk was, not even mounting to the machine. And we found out backups were not working. Perfect. Why backups are not working? Because, 1,000 different reasons. So we said, okay, maybe we'll know when was the last successful backups, or, when was the last backup that failed. Let's go back to our emails. But email notifications might have been set up a long time ago, and maybe that mailbox that was, my fancy notifications at mycompany.com, we stopped using that because, in the next cleanup of emails, we said, okay, what do we use that for? I don't remember, delete it. So you're like, okay, what am I doing? I have a broken disk, I have no backups, or at least no recent backups, because my latest backup is old enough that I would better say to my users, I fucked up, sorry, go find a competitor and do your job in there. And we had no emails to make sure that, what was happening there. Inodes, very nasty. So, okay, we said, okay, we need to do something. We take down the service. We put out a very nice maintenance page. We had one of those because we had a few other downtimes before. So at least that was very successful. 5 minutes later, we had a very good maintenance page up. We're on call with Paris, and we tried to, okay, we have a disk. That disk maybe has some data, maybe not, but we cannot mount it. And we have to figure out what we're going to do there. We're in the middle of, what is the best way to describe how badly did we fail? How are we going to say to our users that, we know that you keep everything in Git, so you're safe. It's our fault, but you use Git, maybe you have your files in your Git server. And at the same time, we're compiling a postmortem, a sorry email to all the users, all that stuff. And at the same time, we're trying to find solutions on what we're going to do. So first of all, we try all the things. We go to the cloud provider. We say, if we fucked up, please, do you have like a secret backup or, something that we can use so that we can get it out? Or maybe you can do some magic, or can you please log into our servers and help us out? We go to L3, L2, L1, or all the different levels of support. Nobody can help us. We say, okay, we're alone. Maybe we need to find something else. So the next thing is that we read into the internet that maybe if you reflash the partition table into the disk, you will be able to mount it again, and maybe it will have those files in it. Because the idea is that when you have a disk, in the beginning, you have like a partition table saying, I have a partition, starts here, it ends there, all those things. And then you have the files. So the files are actually encoded in bits in your disk. So we say, okay, some people that are smarter than us say that maybe this is a solution. And of course, we say, okay, you know what? We're going to do a block level copy of the disk to a new one because we don't want to mess up, the only potential solution to our problems. And then into this copy, we're going to try, playing with all those things. So I'm like, Paris, I found the solution. I will do that. Everything will be fine. And of course, everything failed because in the block level copy, maybe I was doing something wrong, or, maybe something was done in the process, or I don't know what. This failed. So even though we had, a copy of the disk, we could not do anything that would be actually usable. So the last solution is, what? We're going to do this on the one disk that maybe will work. It's our last chance. So we start Googling and we find out how this cloud provider was provisioning disks by default. Because if you put a slightly different partition table, your data are gone. So we have to make sure that we have the exact same settings in there. So we Googling, we found, other people having similar issues, and then we say, okay, these are the instructions of how this cloud provider is provisioning disks. Okay, that's one. We are going to do the exact same steps. So we have a disk with data, and we would like to format it, so add the partition table in it, with the settings that we thought maybe were the best ones, and that was like a last chance. Of course, we cross our fingers. Maybe if you're religious, you go and pray to the God that you believe in, and then you say, okay, I will hit this enter button, and afterwards, I either have completely fucked up because now my data are not recoverable at all, or maybe it will work. You hit enter, and thankfully for us, this worked. But Paris started smoking after that day, or maybe within that day. Thankfully, he has stopped since, so at least we got over that. And I'm pretty sure that I lost, maybe a few gray hair or, whatever it was. It was very stressful, but at least we made it work. So, of course, afterwards, we started having better backups, better notifications. We knew about inodes this time, so we could, reprovision the file system with a better structure to make sure that we have more inodes for the same amount of disk space, and maybe go to BTRFS. That was the next idea that we had. But a few thoughts, if I can close with that, is don't try this at home. Very stressful. You don't need to mess with that. Find something more fun to do. If you have backups, make sure that you take them regularly and you check that they are taken. So make sure that even though that you think you have backups, make sure that they exist and make sure that you can recover from them. Because maybe in another meetup we can talk about, not being able to recover correctly from backups. But that's another discussion. Another thing that we started doing is get notifications for success and for failure. Of course, success will be a lot of spam, but at least if you stop getting them, you will notice after a while. Maybe not immediately, but after like a few hours or a few days, you will notice that you're not getting any emails. And try to avoid node modules. They're fun, but maybe not as much fun. I mean, there was like an inside joke afterwards that if something goes wrong with the disk, we try to find node modules, which is both, something that you do not really need, because if you delete node modules, you just need to download them again. So it was like the easiest deletion process inside our service later on after that incident. So that was it. If you want to remove the O from DevOps, feel free to talk to us. We're a company called Logic. We do a lot of consulting on DevOps, on Python, or all those things. And again, thanks a lot for being here. I think we have questions at the end. If somebody wants to have a question, otherwise I'll be happy to have a discussion afterwards. And thanks again for hosting us here.